Boker Tov, Shavua Tov. Hope everyone's well. We're halfway through, or maybe more than halfway through the Brisker Rav, Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah, Perek Zayin Halacha Tes, and we're on page Ches, and we're up to the top left column, and we're going through the sugya of Sheson Vasachas, Sheson Chai, according to the Rambam and the Rif. And just to summarize the last point that we had on Yom Chamishi, we came to the conclusion that the Rambam is operating with two different dimensions. On the one hand, it seems that the Ikar mitzvah is the Shtiyas HaKos, and that's why the Rambam contrasts the halacha of Kiddush, where the requirement is Mole Lugmav, with the halacha of Dalid Kosos, where he requires Rov Kos. And the Rambam completely omits the shir of Mole Lugmav, which he codifies in the 29th chapter of Hilchos Shabbos, here in the 7th chapter of Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah. In Kiddush, he says that the shir is Mole Lugmav. Here, it's Rov Kos, and the Brisker Rav assumes that Rov Kos means this halach of Shtiyas HaKos, and Shtiyas HaKos depends upon Rov Kos, which would mean that if you have a tall kos, even though it's way beyond Mole Lugmav, you still have to drink Rov Kos. But on the other hand, the Rambam says that if you drank the 4 kosos, Shalo al Seder Abrachos, which he calls Shesod Vasachas, then Yidei Dalid Kosos Lo Yotza. The Rambam says you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah Dalid Kosos. Why not? You drank 4 kosos, and it was Yain Bozuk. And the answer is that even though the main mitzvah Shtia, however, the mitzvah of Shtia represents only one element of the essence of the mitzvah of Arba Kosos, and the other element is to set up each kos as a kos shel bracha. And for that, of course, Mole Lugma would be sufficient, but the reason why we're going to acquire Rov Kos, and for that matter, that every single person at the table drink the 4 kosos, is because the element of kos shel bracha is only an add-on to the critical, essential element of Shtiyas HaKos. Ulefi zeh, on the top of the left column, nire v'zeu bir divrei HaGemara lefi Gizil Rambam, kavi Shtiyah v'asachas, v'yedei cheres yotzi yedei arba kosos lo yotzi. So as far as cheres, which means the Shtiyah of Dalid Kosos is concerned, he definitely fulfilled that mitzvah, and that's called derech cheres, because the mitzvah of Shtiyah is generated by it as a fulfillment of cheres. However, as far as kos shel bracha is concerned, he forfeited that kiyum, and that's what the Rama means by Yidei Arba Kos Lo Yotza. Now, the opposite is true in the case of undiluted wine. Yidei Arba Kosos Yotza, because he set up a bracha on each one of the kosos, but Yidei Cheres Lo Yotza, he has not fulfilled the mitzvah derech cheres, because for that you need Yain Bozuk. And again, the Brisker Rav summarizes his understanding of the Rambam Shita, the Vevis Tarti Isnu Ba Mitzvah Arba Kosos. This mitzvah is a hybrid mitzvah with 2 dimensions. And the ikar of the mitzvah, of course, is cherus, which means to drink Dalid Kosos laharos es atzmo kiluhu yotzim mitzrayim. And we saw that even as Seba, together with Dalid Kosos, is incorporated into the Chayiv Odom laharos es atzmo and the kiyum of derech cherus. And that element of the kiyum cherus is an essential part of the mitzvah of Daled Kosos. And in addition to that, as we said earlier, he's got the problem of Sheson Bavasachas, where he forfeits the kiyum of Koshel Bracha. In brackets, he says that the source for this chiyuv of Laharis Atzmo is the pasuk Uzacharto ki Eved Yisa. So the Chachamim took this mitzvah of Zechira and they transformed it into a mitzvah of Maisa, which requires the Shti of Daled Kosos together with Heseva, and that's the kiyum of Derech Cheres Laharis Atzmo. Where did the Rambam get this from? The Gemara says twice on Daf Kuf Tes and again on Kuf Yud Zayin Arba Kosei Tiknu Rabbanel Derech Cheres. So you see that the essence of the mitzvah of Daled Kosos is Derech Cheres. And he drinks Daled Kosos and he fulfills Derech Cheres. And Lefi Zeh, L'chor Pshita Dashtia Hiya Mitzvah. What does it mean, Derech Cheres? Derech Cheres means to demonstrate that you're a Ben Chorin. I need the Shti of Daled Kosos to do that. Now, you might have prematurely jumped to a conclusion, and it's an incorrect conclusion, that according to the Rambam, just the mitzvah of Daled Kosos just reduces itself just to Shtia of Darba Kosos. But the Brisker Rav says that L'chol Hashitos, Ulam Hareze L'chol Hashitos, Shadaled Kos Tzrichas Yiyu Kos Shel Bracha, and therefore, when the Gemara says that Arba Kosi Tiknu Rabbana Derech Cheres Kol Chad V'Chad Navid Bei Mitzvah, each one of the Kosos requires its own mitzvah, which means its own bracha, so that even though the essential takana is Shtia Derech Cheres, but there was the takana that each one of the Kosos should be a Koshel bracha. And that's why Sheson Vasachas is Yidei Arba Kosos Lo Yotza. If he drinks them Shalol Seder HaBrachos, then that element of Kol Chad V'Chad Na'avid Bei Mitzvah, that each one of the Daled Kosos should be established in Koshel Bracha, that element, that kiyum he forfeits when he drinks the world Vasachas. And I believe this is where we got up to on Thursday. Me'ayin b'Magid Mishnah, the Hachdish Sheson Vasachas, Pirush, the Shasar B'Kosos Chalukim, he drank in 4 different kosos, not like Rashi, where Vasachas means he poured them all into one kos. Chak lo ala seder. So he didn't recite the brachos that are respective to each one of the kosos. Ubal korchenu, and therefore we must conclude the gam zeh me'ikra mitzvah shel Daled Kosos. This is also part of the essence of Daled Kosos, another dimension of Daled Kosos, in addition to Derech Cheres, sheyu arba kosos shel bracha. Utarte micholu b'hach mitzvah shel arba kosos. There are 2 dimensions to arba kosos. Chada, it's got to be shtia, and that's the Maisa of Cheres. And number 2, there's a din that all the arba kosos, each one has to be a koshel bracha. V'gam zehu me'ikra mitzvah. And in that second element, the Rambam and Tosfos see through one eye. The Dea Achas, they have one opinion that you need to set up each kos as a koshel bracha. And that's why, Im Shosan Chai, even though he was Yotze Koshel Bracha, the Rambam says Yidei Cheres Lo Yotza, because the fundamental essence of Dalit Kosos, as it was established, was Derech Cheres. And if he's drinking undiluted wine, Yain Chai, that's not Derech Cheres. But now, let's say, it's like Ulahepach. Let's say he drinks Yain Mazud, but Vasacha, Shalo Aseder. So he's Makayim the mitzvah of Shtia, of Derech Cheres, because he demonstrated his Cheres by drinking tasty, diluted wine in 4 different cups. What does that mean? The kiyum of kos shel bracha he forfeits. The tarti mili isnu b'mitzvahs arba kosos l'dasaram. 2 different dimensions to the mitzvah daled kosos. So typical of Brisk, to take halacha and smash it into 2 different kiyumim. Chada number 1, mitzvah shtia, that's derech cheres, and number 2 is a din of arba kosos shel bracha. So we're up to the paragraph Ehine on the bottom of page Ches. But let's ask the following question. According to the Brisker Rav and the Rambam, when you have these 2 elements, are they interdependent? Are they an overlap? Like, for example, the question as to whether or not the koshel kiddush, insofar as it's a koshel bracha, would set up requirements for the shtia, as far as the kiyum of derech cheres. And the nafkamina that we discussed, if you recall, was yain kanditon, yain sheish bo dvash, which is posel nisuch, and therefore, according to the Rambam, is excluded from kiddush. If he drank that, would he at least salvage the mitzvah of derech cheres? Or do we say no? That even the mitzvah of derech cheres depends upon a koshel bracha. And if I cannot establish this kos as a koshel kiddush, according to the Shittas of Rambam, because it's not roy l'nisuch, then it cannot serve as the daled kosos, one of the daled, for the shtia of derech cheres. That's an overlap. I call it an interdependence. Or no. Perhaps on a more simple level, you could say these 2 elements, these 2 kiyuvim are separate one from the other. So that if for the koshel kiddush, according to the Ram, if he took yain kanditon, he was not yotzi the mitzvah of kiddush, that's as far as koshel bracha. But nevertheless, with regard to derech cheres, the wine is very tasty wine. It's been diluted. He drank the cup of wine. That's a kiyum of derech cheres. He drank a beseba. All right, it was yain kanditon. So what? So it wasn't royal l'nisach al gam mizbech. What does that have to do with daled kosos, with the mitzvah shtia derech cheres? And now we can add the tour. Remember the tour in the name of the Yushalmi said that he already recited Hallel in the Beis HaKnesses. He's not going to recite a second Hallel, a repeat Hallel on the Leil HaSeder, and yet he's going to drink the 4th kos of the Daled Kosos without Hallel. And we proved from this tour in the name of the Yushalmi that the mitzvah of Shtia is independent of the bracha. So the 4th kos doesn't have any bracha on it because the bracha of Hallel, you cannot repeat. You've already recited Hallel in the Beis HaKnesses, but yeah, you're going to drink that 4th kos, and that will be a kiyum of Daled Kosos. So you see that Shtias Daled Kosos remains independent of Koshel bracha. The Hine b'Tosus Sham al Hadi Omar, and then again, we've said it over and over again that the strange thing about this Brisker Rav and the Rambam is that if the Rambam holds Sheson Vasachas lo yotzi dei al kosos because he doesn't have kosher bracha. The Rambam has that in Perek Tes, Perek Zayin Halacha Tes. It's only in Perek Zayin Halacha Yud that he introduces the bracha. That was the Amudei Yom. V'hinei b'tosus sham al hadi omer sheson chai yotza kosru b'zel shonu mashmal l'chatchila boy meziga v'chein b'perek shlosha sha'achlu amrinan akol moda v'koshel bracha she'ein mevorchanav ad she'yitem b'sochel mayim. So Tosus, we should probably see this Tosus inside. Let me just get a Gemara for a second. No, I'm not finding it now. Does anybody see it? Let's see. Maybe we can. When he says sham, you wonder what he means by sham. Let me just see. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but let's take a look on Kuf Yud Zayin. Maybe we'll find it. Kuf Yud Zayin. Look in one more place, maybe Kuf Tes. Okay, sorry. I'm just not seeing it right now. Maybe it'll come up a little bit later. He says here, Al Hadi Son Chayotza. Oh, there it is. Fine. Sorry. I was on the right Amud before, but I was looking at the wrong Tosos. Let's take a quick look at the Tosos on Kuf Ches Amid Beis. Sheson Chayotza. Mashma lechatchila boy meziga. And we said that that's because of Chayav Odom Laharis Atzmo, and he has to drink their cherus, yayin mozug with hasebim. V'chein beperek shlosha sha'achlu amrinan hakol moda v'koshel bracha she'ein mevarchan alav and she'yitain l'sochel mayim. Wow, that's strange. Because this is the sugya shloshachu of koshel bracha, and now we're requiring yayin mozuk. We kept saying over and over again that koshel bracha doesn't require mozuk, and chai was fine. So that's apparently a Gemara in Brachos on Daf Nun. Now he quotes the opposite on Daf Nun Aleph in Brachos. It says, "Asar dvarim nemer b'kol shel brach v'tzar chai," that we need undiluted wine. The Rashi Pirish Sham. I have a little bit of a mem here, a small mem. What does he tell you here? Dibra Maskal Chai. The Hodamir the Tzar Chai, Hainu Shi Yitneu Chai, because Birchas HaMazon. Lafuke Shalo Yimzegenu, because Zeh, the Yishpoch, because Acher V'Yivar. Okay, so Rashi's learning, which I don't know the details here, this Rashi, but something about setting up two different kosos. That's what we're trying to avoid. Okay, so a lot of details here and nuances in this Kosos that we would have to see under separate advisement, but one thing that seems clear is that Kosos' Shita is that even in a kosher bracha, we require chai. So how does that jive with what we've been saying now, that the requirement of, I'm sorry, even what I meant to say was even in a kosher bracha, we require mazuk. How does that jive with what we're saying here? That the reason why we require mazuk is only because of their cheres. It's not because of kosher bracha. So he quotes Rabbeinu Tam, and that leads us to page 16 on the top right. Shamina midivei atosis the gam le'inyam meziga lo nemar shum din mechudash bi arba kosos. Chaku din ha'omer b'chol kos shel bracha they bracha aleim ad sheyutim toch hamayim. So we want to enhance our kosher bracha by diluting it. That's Rabbeinu Tam. So maybe this is all consistent with Shitas HaTosos, that we reduce Daled Kosos to Kosos Shel Bracha. And Tos doesn't even require Shtiyah. And he only requires Moli Lugma. He doesn't require Rov Kos. One person is drinking. And we don't have to guarantee that every person at the table receive his own Daled Kosos, because they're all Kosos Shel Bracha. So now the din of Chai as an incomplete mitzvah is simply an application of the halacha of Kos Shel Bracha. And then in Kos Shel Bracha, Chai is an incomplete mitzvah. And Huadin Huatam, the same logic applies to Daled Kosos. So what does it mean, Yidei Cheres Lo Yotza? That's going to be the problem. On the one hand, everything seems to be very smooth, L'shitaso, that Tosos, who equates the Daled Kosos with Kos Shel Bracha, will have to assume that if there's halacha that you need mazug, that halacha is anchored and is applied here at Daled Kosos based on Kos Shel Bracha. And now we've proven that according to Rabbeinu Tam, a Kos Shel Bracha will require mazug. That's fine. But the Gemara here says that Shesa and Chai Yidei Cheres Lo Yatza. V'zeu shehikshu mi'arba kosos l'birkas hama l'chora lishna the Gemara lo mashma v'dekama Yidei Cheres Lo Yatza. Oh, mashma du din miyuchad b'daled kosos. So I guess the path on which he's leading us, the Brisker, is to assume that in Kosher Bracha, Mazug enhances the mitzvah, but it's not a separate kiyum of Mazug. In Daled Kosos, you have a separate kiyum of mitzvah when you drink yain Mazug because of derech eretz. So do you see where Mazug becomes much more critical in Daled Kosos, to the extent to which the Gemara says that in the case of Chai Yudei Daled Kosos Yotza, it means that the derech eretz is really an essential part of the mitzvah. And the requirement, the condition to fulfill that mitzvah is yain Mazug. In Kosher Bracha, it's an enhancement of the mitzvah. I show how much chashivas I give to this bracha that I bring out a kosher yain Mazug. Ukefia nira midire atosus and farshi dehad kamar gmari decheres lo yotza lav bezeu ikar taima. What does that mean? Lav bezeu ikar taima. Nishmach binin mizig mishum cheretz. Lav tezeu ikar taima. Let's see. Do we see that language in the Tosos? Lav tezeu ikar taima. I don't see that language here. I'm not sure. Is he quoting the Tosos or he's interpreting the Tosos? He said, he seems to be quoting the Tosos. The lav iker, the lav iker taima, but I don't know where he's seeing that in Tosos. The mishum haki b'idem eziga mishum cheretz. Hatotzol the ovid mitzvah min amuvcha. Should be ein chashivas el b'yayin mazuk mosh kosma Rashbam shom. Hu atzmo adina v'chol kosher bracha kol panim kol atzmo hu gat din shel mitzvah amuvcha kmo kosher. The cheres lo yotza lav dezeu ikar taima. So I think what he's saying, laf, the Zoe Taima means that although the Gemara does mention, in fact, the Cherus lo yatsa, but that's not really the primary reason why there's a problem with Yain Chai. It's not because of Cherus, but rather because of Chashivus that's lacking in Yain, the Chashivus of Yain Mozug that's lacking in Yain Chai, and that's a din in a kosher brach. So the Brisker is learning in the Rambam, in Kosos, that there's no extra kiyum in Daled Kosos of Derech Eretz. It's all kosher brach. That's all it is. You could take the mitzvah of Daled Kosos according to Tosos and reduce it to kosher brach. And the problem with Yain Sheinu Mozeg, Yain Chai, is that it's a kosher bracha problem. In kosher bracha, l'chatchila, we want a Yain shel a kos yain shel chshivus, and unless it's diluted, it's not chosh. So he's lacking the element of chashivus, and that's going to apply to Daled Kosos in the exact way that applies to any kosher bracha. Again, I don't understand how he's not blinking about the language of Gemara that says Yidei Cheres lo yatsa. Ulam, he says, Rambam, Arba Kosel Tzorch Limzo goes on Kedeshet Shtia Areva Kol Fiyayin Fidas Hashose Fiyanirabil Shonu Zeh who did Misuya Bamitzvah Arba Kosos the Mitzvah Shtiyasan Shetei Shtia Areva. The Rambam's language is, which you don't have in Hilchas Brachos with regard, or Hilchas Shabbos with regard to Kiddush, is that you need a Shtia Reva. The Rambam only quotes that in Daled Kosos. And Shtia Reva means Hakolafia Yayin, Hakolafia Shosa, ganze business here in the Rambam. With regard to Mezigas Hakol, your Meziga might be different than me, your percentage of water vis-a-vis yayin is different than my percentage. And all this is because the Rambam is talking about something that's unique to Arba Kosos, that we need a Shtia Reva. So that's all because of the additional element and dimension of Daled Kosos of Derech Cheres. Tosos doesn't have that additional dimension. He has a mono definition of Daled Kosos, and it's kosher bracha, and the requirement of Meziga is al-chatchila mitzvah and a muvchar in any kosher bracha. We're going to apply it to Daled Kosos in the same way that it applies to any kosher bracha. Again, what does it mean? Yidei cheres lo yatsa? I don't know. V'yodio senir midvar v'eze klal din b'chefta shel hakos kak b'maisa shtia shetia shtia reva derech cheres. I think what the Brisker is saying here is that in kosher bracha, the requirement l'chatchila of mazug, reflecting the chshivas of the kos, is objective. It's not going to be dependent upon you or me. You might like your wine more diluted. I like it less diluted. I like it more strong and concentrated. All that is irrelevant to a kosher bracha. So here in Dalit Kosos, the Rambam was very outspoken about the fact that a kol lefi das hashoseh, subjective. This is not an objective definition of chashivus. It's your chashivus, your shti areva. That's your derech eretz. V'zeu din mesuyam b'mitzvah shel arba kosos. Shemitzvah shti yosef shetei shti areva. That's Dalit Kosos. There's no such parallel loch in the kosher bracha of shti areva. Because shti areva is in the gavra. And when it's ever in the gavra, it's subjective to that gavra. It's not chashivus in the chefta. What is this yayin? Does it have chashivus? Then it would be the same objectively for everyone. And that's what's going to apply in Hilchas Kosher Bracha. But in Dalit Kosos, the Rabbi says, no, that's not enough. So again, this is a fascinating additional element to our whole perspective on Dalit Kosos. I don't think we've encountered this before. If we assume that in every kosher bracha there's a requirement of mazug, at least l'chatchila, to enhance the mitzvah, then what's unique about requiring yayin mazug in the Leil HaSeder for the Dalit Kosos? So the way he's presenting Tosos here, again, it's no offense, but he's really putting Tosos down here. The Rambam is so smooth. The Rambam has an additional element besides kosher bracha of derech cherus, and hence yayin chai is lacking in that kiyum of derech cherus. And we're not borrowing from the laws of, or the standards of kosher bracha. Hence, the Rambam will have a subjective definition of mazug. What's mazug for you is not for me, and vice versa. Each individual has his own mazug. It's like you go to a bar, at a wedding, let's say, and you like this drink, and somebody else likes a different drink. Everybody has their own taste. And the Ram requires that with regard to Dalit Kosos, we should satisfy everyone's taste. Even though it means we're going to have different wines and different levels of diluting wine, but that's all because of the subjective maisa of derech eretz. But in kosher bracha, it's all objective. We would never say, well, this is mazug for him, and this is chai for him, and so forth and so on. That subjective element doesn't come to the fore. The chashivas of the yayin for kosher bracha is objective. It's the same for you and for me and for everybody else. And if you're going to apply the requirement of kosher bracha to Dalit Kosos, because in Kosos, in his favorite reference, it's an absolute equation, then there's no room for shtia, reva, and akol fidas hashosa, and all these subjective criteria. They don't apply to Dalit Kosos. But again, as I emphasized before, the Brisker is really giving the Rambam, he becomes the king point here, because he's going to say that Yidei Cheres Lo Yotza in the case of Yain Chai. It's a specific halacha in Daled Kosos. Insofar as Daled Kosos has the kiyum of shtia derech eretz. The odios in near midvar the ainze klal din ba khafte shal kosrak me meisa shtir de shtir rebe der khes gemur midvar so shtir so fi das shal kolecha vekh lo fi ma shehu vayne mishum de lav mishum khashivus de kos sin in Allah rak mishum meisa shtir. The meisa shtir is subjective as opposed to the kos, which is objective. So koshel brach, it's all about the khashivus of the kos. It's objective. In the case of Daled Kosos, your shtia is derech eretz as a maisa gavra. It's very subjective. It's not in the cheft of the kos. Again, you're going to require a yayin mozug in the cheft of the kos based on the kiyum of koshel bracha. The Rambam does not deny that Daled Kosos, in addition to the shtia derech eretz, has a requirement of koshel bracha, and in that requirement, in that context, we need an objective chashivus, and it's got to be yayin mazug. But above and beyond that, the Rambam wants that the mazug of the meziga should be a kol fidas hashosa because of the kiyum of derech eretz, which is going to generate, with regard to the yayin, a din of subjective arevalim. For that ma'aser shtia derech eretz kol echad v'echad b'didei misharinon. We're going to have to fit it. Put the shoe fits the person who wears the shoe, who has that size of the shoe, and the yayin has to fit the shosa. I remember my father's on the night of the Seder, he used to walk around. I think I mentioned this to you more than once. And he had many, many different options of wines and grape juice and whatever. And he would ask you, which one do you want? And he would designate that for you for the Seder. All based on this Rambam. Of Shtia Rev Holav L'fidas HaShosa. L'fi ma shekasavnu l'malo. Pluka zu shel Rambam Tosos Mesperes Heitev Dildas HaTosos K'mitzvah shel Dal Mitzvah Kayem Eschak. Shein nasi koshel bracha, v'maisa shtia he kechol shtias koshel bracha. The ein lezeh dinim klal. Right? It's not a kiyum of maisa shtia in the gavra to enhance the kiyum. I don't care in a koshel bracha how much you enjoy the wine, you don't enjoy the wine. They're objective halachas and the chashivas of the cost, and therefore it should be mazul. Mishavaki svirale, there's a kontosas, the gam hard to be inabu meziga, who zem mishum din mitzvah muvchar diomar b'chol koshel bracha. So again, according to Tosfos, the reason why you need meziga and Daled Kosos is for the same identical reason that you need meziga in any koshel bracha, because the mitzvah min hamuvchar is that it should be mazuk for the chashivas of the cause. V'zeu shehikshu al zeh mikoshel birkas hamazon the ein bi'arba kosos din mechudesh b'zeh. So that's what was bothering Tosfos here. In a koshel birkas hamazon, which is listed there in the Masechet Brachos on Daf Nun, was we require l'chatchila mazuk, so there's no new din over here in Dalit Kosos. But Rambam Srila, the Eshbar Kabbalah Mitzvah Shtia, so there's a very new din that separates Dalit Kosos from any kosher bracha, and that's the din of Shtia, and that's their cherus, and therefore there are separate dinim in the Gavras Maisa Shtia. Shetei Shtia Reva, Vilav Hachilo Makaimu Der Cherus. And that's what we said, that the additional element above and beyond kosher bracha, according to the Rambam, is Shtia Derech Cherus, and within the context of Shtia Derech Cherus, we require mazuk, but that's a different kind of a mazuk. It's not the mazuk of chashivus of a kosher bracha, but rather it's the mazuk of your subjective definition of what for you is Shtia Revu. Hakol Fidas Hashos. So the kiyum of Shtia in the Rambam's reference adds a whole slew of dinim. For example, Molei Lugmav is not enough, you need Rov Kos. Number two, you're going to require Meziga Shel Kol Echad V'Echad. Right, Lefidas Hashosa. Number three, everyone has to drink their own wine. It's not enough, like in a kosher bracha, that one person sets up a kiyum for everyone else, and one person at the table will drink. Everyone's going to have to drink. Did I leave out anything? 1 second. Well, again, this is not an afkamina la'alacha, but conceptually, Heseba and Shtia are two sides of the same coin. They belong to the same kiyum of derech cherus. But according to the sheet of Kosos, where the mitzvah Dalit Kosos is reduced to nothing more than kosher bracha, Heseba is a separate independent kiyum, has nothing to do with Dalit Kosos per se. Meaning with this extra element which Tosfos doesn't recognize, the kiyum of derech cherus. So that means that according to Tosfos, in Dalit Kosos, there's no kiyum derech cherus, and Heseba remains a separate, independent kiyum that was attached to Dalit Kosos. It's a little bit choppy according to Tosfos. It's so much smoother according to the Rambam, because the Rambam has in the essence of the mitzvah Dalit Kosos Shtia and the derech cherus, and therefore Heseba fits like a glove and is integrated together with the Shtia to form one kiyum of Chayav Adam Laharos Atzmi. The hein divrei Gemara dim shason chai nehi di yotzi yidei chovas arba kosos shel bracha billion din shel kosher bracha harei amazigi hirak mitzvah min amuvchar yidei cheres lo yotza, but salom the mitzvahs hashtia shehi mishum cheres that he cannot fulfill with Yain Mozart. One second, I'm sorry. Yeah. So again, the word meziga in the context of the Rambam takes on two different meanings. Le'inyan din kosher bracha meziga lirat inyan shel mitzvah min hamuvchar. And that din that the heftish of the cost for kosher bracha should be mazud and give it chashivus, that's only a din of mitzvah muvcha. Aval yidei cheres lo yotza, with regard to the mitzvah daled kosos, we go as far as to say yidei cheres lo yotza. It's not just a mitzvah in a muvchar, but mitzvah hashtia she mishum cheres lo yotza. Whoa. Let's just think about that. I don't know. Is the Brisker totally compelling on this point? Namely, that according to the Rambam, if you drank yain chai, then you did not fulfill the mitzvah shtia. See, that bothers me because I would have said that shtia is one kiyum, and for that all you need is yain. Any yayin will do. And that's shtia. So that's one element or level of derech eretz. But then there's another higher element of derech eretz, shtia areva olav l'fi das hashoseh, and yayin chai, even though it does have a shem yayin, is lacking in that extra kiyum of derech eretz. He's saying now that shtia and cheres are one and the same. And if the Gemara says about yain chai that yidei cheres lo yotza means yidei shtia lo yotza, he doesn't even have that beres kiyum of shtia. And I believe that the Amudei Hod has something to say about that. But often Rambam pligi in Kosos b'tarta. There's a double machlokas between the Rambam and Kosos. Let's see if we can guess which way he's taking us without reading the next line, if you don't mind. So one machlokas clearly is the last thing that we discussed here about mazug versus chad. Whereas Kosos calls it a mitzvah and a muvchar, the Rambam is going to say yidei cheres lo yotza. And then there's another machlokas between the Rambam and Kosos about the entire issue of shtia, whether or not you need shtia. So the Rambam is going to require shtia, rov kos, moli lugma is not enough, and Kosos would say moli lugma is enough. Chada, if it's shason chayil das aram Kosos kia mitzvah Kosos, chakdil also mitzvah a muvcha, the mitzvah and muvcha that applies to any kosher bracha. When we give a Rama mashma, the mefarish the chaselo kol hakiyu shel derech cheres. Okay, v'shenis pligi b'shason vas achas das Kosos lo kiyam klal mitzvah Kosos. Okay. Das Rama kiyam mitzvah shtir. Okay, he doesn't go into the discussion about rov kos versus moli lugma. V'hini b'shulchan aruch siman tov pei gimel pasuk ein lo yayin yuchal kaksam kamar medina. That would reflect the sheet of Kosos, not the Rama. L'chora yef shalom the apal gav daminim psachim the gam kamar medina koshel Abdullah. Umimela duedim b'chol kos shel bracha, but kol ze rak le'yidin kos shel bracha. Kamar medina is also called a kos. V'le'ela peslik mitzvah shtias yayin derech cheres is therefore we're going to require yayin after. And Chamar Medina is not called yayin. As great as Chamar Medina is, it's not yayin. So Chamar Medina could be valid as far as kosher bracha is concerned. V'havi kilu sheson chai damini yidei arba Kosos yotza yidei cheres yotza. The hochinami b'chamar medina de kavosa. Not sure what he means by that. Just 1 second. I mean, he's saying that, look, just like the Rambam excludes Chai as far as the Kiyum of Shtia Derech Cheres, therefore the Rambam is going to exclude Chamar Medina. But again, there are two different reasons, really. I mean, Chamar Medina is excluded in Daled Kosos because it's not Yayin, and the mitzvah Shtia is on Yayin. Chai is a slightly different story. I mean, there it's not Derech Cheres because it's not a Reva Olam. Hachinam Chamar Medina Kava Ulam Yeshlom the Emes Gamar Amos for you like Kenel the Harei Divrei Ramah Kaimi Im Ein Lo Yain. Oh, so the Ramah, when he says you can fall back position and rely on Chamar Medina, that's if he doesn't have Yain, and therefore he can obtain at least that kiyum of Koshel Brach. Ubofen Zehu the Omar the Yikach Chamar Medina v'Yikaim al Kol Ponim Mitzvahs Arba Kosos Shel Bracha. Excellent. Kamo b'Yayin Chai. Right, he forfeits Derech Cheres because he only has Chamar Medina, he doesn't have Yayin. Aval Enoch Hinami. The Yuchal Lahasig Yayin Mechuyev Hu Lishtos Arba Kosos Miyayin. Even the Ramah would agree. But you need Shtia. That's a kiyum of Derech Cheres. For that you need Yayin. And Chamar Medina won't work. Because Chamar Medina is not Yayin, but it would still be considered a Koshel Bracha. See, now we really get down to the issue that we were discussing about the overlap. You remember when we spoke about the first kos was Yain Kanditon, or to drink the kos of Hallel without Hallel. That whole discussion now comes to the fore, I think, because with Chamar Medina, you might have a koshel bracha, but you don't have derech cheres. So is it meaningful to separate the two and obtain a kiyum of koshel bracha with Chamar Medina, despite the fact that you have no shtia of Daled Kosos? Could the kiyum of koshel bracha stand alone without the kiyum of shtia Daled Kosos? That's going to be the nafkamina of Chamar Medina in an event that he doesn't have yain. Our question was the exact opposite. Can he have shtia Daled Kosos as a kiyum of shtia derech cheres, even if it's not a koshel bracha? And that we said yes. So now we're asking in the opposite direction, can we have a kiyum of mitzvahs Daled Kosos according to the Rambam if we reduce it just simply to koshel bracha in the case of Chamar Medina? So to have a mitzvah, a kiyum of shtia without koshel bracha, that for sure is okay, and that's the sugya of Shesah and Masechet, where he forfeits the kiyum of koshel bracha, but he certainly obtains the kiyum of Daled Kosos shtia derech cheres. But the flip side, can he obtain and salvage at least koshel bracha through Chamar Medina and still have Daled Kosos? That's an issue. And probably the Brisker is inclined to think, I'm just guessing in this Tzorach Iyun, that he would not have the kiyum of Shtiyas Daled Kosos with Chamar Medina. But nevertheless, he's Mekayim for Kos Shobra. Shuv Matzasi v'Shuvas Arosh, Klal Chafei Shekosu came Lehedjed, V'Shtei Chovas Hein, Chovas Yayin, V'Chovas Arba Kosos. I guess he means Arba Kos Shel Bracha. V'Chadi Armini B'Gemara V'Huda Shasi Ruba the Kosu Mishum Chovas Yayin. Right, so Yayin is derech cheres. Al Mishum Chovas Daled Kosos, meaning Kos Shel Bracha. Hayadai b'shtiyas acherim, and we could add here also moli lugmav. K'mo b'chol kos shel brach. Harei b'mefarish. The day yain yotza ein rotza lomar simchas yontiv. The imkain lo ayishayich al zeh shiru deruba de kos. So God convinces Daled Kosos gufa nichlu shnei dvar chova shtiyas yain al zeh ve'inin sheyishtahu biatzmo ruba de kos. The chovas Daled Kosos shel bracha. Shebazeh dinam linyan te'imo keshar Kosos shel bracha. Yain shom de maisi raya mitalad kosos l'chol kosos shel bracha de gamba hu be'inen te'imas moli lugmav k'mo be'kiddush. So the Rosh also would have a kiyum of dalid kosos shel bracha if he drinks moli lugmav, and even if only one person drinks from the entire household. So the requirement of Ruba de Kasa is only reflective of the Kiyam of Shtiyas Daled Kosos Derech Cheres. Zizel Hejik Mosh Kasavna V'das HaRambam V'yem B'nei Makfilu Dursos the HaRambam Gores V'mokum Yidei Yayin Yotza Yidei Cheres Yotza. U'fi Mashkasavnu Kam Divya Ramam Hochi Misparsho Tzolom Shtiyas HaYayin Shezeu Iker Mitzvos Mishum Derech Cheres Avol Meikar Adin Shavayu Shovin V'yesh B'mitzvos Daled Kosos not only Chovas Yayin but also Kosos Shel Bracha. Okay then? So that's the siyum on the Brisker row. Okay, tomorrow we'll try to add a few elements of Heseva into the equation. Okay then? So we'll stop here.